Hello everyone, this is Dan here. Today I'm going to be sharing with you what it means to worship God with our entire lives and how we can make our lives a living sacrifice to Him. And the passage we're going to be looking at particularly is Romans 12, 1 to 2. From the NIV it reads, Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So as I said, we're going to be looking at what it means to worship God with our whole lives. And I thought I would ask some people who are a bit wiser than I am, and that was my family. So we're going to interview some of them, and hopefully they give us some good answers. We're also going to be going through the message translation of these two verses because it puts out quite clearly, and there's kind of three different steps that we can look at. So yeah, first up, we're going to go and we're going to ask my youngest brother, Josh, what he thinks about this. So Josh, what does it mean to worship God with your entire life?
I think everyone has different ways of worshiping God. Some people like to do things physically, some people like to do things musically. And I think it's partly finding ways that you can worship God comfortably, finding an environment that you are not, that you can be yourself, because there's no, like, worshiping God with your whole self. If you're pretending to be someone who you're not, or are in a place where you as a person are not comfortable, then you can't worship Him with your whole being. So I think finding a way where you can comfortably worship is important. But the other thing is not relying on that place too much to be able to worship God wherever you are in your daily life. So finding ways, whether it's to play some music in the background or just to have things on your heart to pray about in your head when you have moments, it all glorifies Him. So yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Great, thank you. So yeah, Josh is saying there how we can worship God, not in church, but how we can do it at homes, in our bedrooms, and how we can do that really easily, without music, and without anyone else there really. We're going to look at the first part of the message translation now, which says, "Here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering." Um, which is maybe something that you haven't thought about before, or maybe it's something that you've been trying to challenge yourself to do. But basically, worship isn't something that just happens on a Sunday morning, or isn't something that requires music either. We should be worshiping God throughout our day, throughout our week. Yeah, whether that be listening to worship music, or just thinking about God. Yeah, worship is a continuous thing, and it's not just something that we should do actively in designated slots. Um, yeah, the next person that we're going to ask the question to is my mum. So, mum, what does it mean to worship God with your whole life?
Well, it means that there's no divide between the sort of sacred churchy stuff that we do and the everyday stuff that we do. It frustrates me sometimes when we call our music groups in church our worship groups, like that is what worship is, just that, even not the whole service, even just that music part. And that's not what worship means at all. Worship is about the whole of our lives actually being an offering to Him, a sacrifice of praise. Um, and I really love some of the writings of Brother Lawrence, who was a 17th century French monk who was really frustrated because he was stuck in the kitchen and peeling potatoes. But for 10 years he struggled with that. But then he realised that actually that could be just as much worship as the time that he spent praying. And I remember reading that around the time when actually Dan was born. At that point, I was a GP, part-time GP, and but had also done a lot of work with Dan's dad, Neil, youth work, and I helped to lead the music group, and played the organ. I was on the PCC and helped lead Alpha, and suddenly I had this baby who was completely dependent on me, and I was tired because I was up in the night feeding and changing nappies, and we were using terry toweling nappies, so I spent a lot of time washing nappies, and I was like, oh man, I couldn't even get my quiet times in properly, and I can't be as much use to God. Maybe God doesn't love me as much. I'm not serving him as I should. And I really remember God speaking to me at that time and saying, no, actually, whatever you're doing for me, if you're doing it, whatever you're doing in your life, if you're doing it with love for me and love for this precious little one that you've given me, that is worship. And I've really remembered that as I've gone on, and sometimes now having 3 more grown-up boys, I'll be doing the washing and I'll be cooking and I'll be shopping, and I'm thinking, this is so much work on top of sort of doing general practice stuff and church stuff, but it's all a part of loving my boys, but also loving God in them and through them. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a long answer, but I think Dan turned out all right through it all. So.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mam really helped make the distinction there between musical worship and everyday worship. The next part of the message that we're going to look at is don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. So yeah, in our everyday lives, whether it be doing the washing up or doing laundry or doing work, it's really often to do it just without thinking about it. We've done it so many times, and for a lot of us it's a very repetitive task, and probably something that we don't enjoy as much. But actually, as Mam said, we can still worship God through that, and the love that we show to others, that shows God's love through that. And just thinking about how we can love God and how we can love others in everything we do is a really good way to worship. And yeah, just bringing God into our everyday lives, how we can involve him, make him the center in whatever we do, even the small things. God really loves it when we say even small prayers to him, whether it be finding a matching pair of socks or just helping you to finish your work quickly on time. God loves it when we bring him into even the small things in our life. So yeah, the next person I'm going to ask is my dad. Okay, Dad, what does it mean to worship God with your whole life?
Well, we know we're supposed to do that, and sometimes people say, God will only ask me to do stuff that he gives me like a passion for. So how do I know God's calling me to do something? Well, what energizes you, that sort of thing. I want to say 2 things about that, some bad news and then some good news. I think the bad news is that I don't buy that and completely, because that might give you a get out, as in like, well, it's my whole life, but it'll only be things like I really enjoy doing that. I get up in the morning and you go, yes, like bring it on. Well, the reason I think beware of that teaching is I don't think Jesus got up in the morning and said, yes, bring the cross on, come on, Father, thank you so much, one day closer to the cross. He knew it was his destiny. He knew he had to do it. It was a spiritual act of sacrifice, close to the definition of worship in like Romans 1. So bad news, sometimes I think God's going to call us to do things that hurt, quite frankly, and that's part of our obedience and worship to him. The good news, I think, is that sometimes those things can get and will get easier the more we do them. So like a habit, like say running a mile in 10 minutes, if you've never ran, either that's impossible or you can just about manage it, but it really, really hurts. But then over time, it gets easier and gets more normal. So for me, I'll just give you an example. I'm not saying I'm a complete example of having like cracked it, but I do youth work with secondary age young people. I used to find residentials sleeping on church floors and actually camping like really hard work. I would count the days off when I was there until it was done. It was just something I had to do as part of obedience, but I really didn't like it. You're kind of on duty 24 hours and you don't sleep very well. And over time, just like I've enjoyed it more. Like now I would say I kind of look forward to it. I know it's important in terms of spiritual lives of young people where God often speaks to them, but for me personally, it's something that God's made easier for me as I've been obedient to him. So bad news, I don't think it's all about just doing things that you really enjoy, but good news, I think God can honor your obedience and it can get easier as you go along.
Great, thank you. yeah, as Dad said, there is stuff in our lives that we maybe don't enjoy as much, but God's not calling us to get rid of anything that we don't enjoy, but actually He's calling us to bring Him into those situations. And as we listen to what He wants us to do, listen to His will for us, even if it is doing stuff that we don't enjoy, as we bring Him into that and we focus on Him, we forget what the situation is, and we stop thinking about how much we don't like it, but actually how much we love God, and that outweighs any measure of disliking from that. This leads really well on into the next part of the message, which is fix your attention on God and you'll be transformed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you, and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God wants to bring out the best of you and develop well-formed maturity. So yeah, going into this week, I challenge you that if there is stuff that you don't enjoy, work or washing up, for example, instead of thinking about maybe how the world would see it as something that we don't enjoy, but we just have to do it, think about how you can bring God into that, and focus on God and worshiping God with that. I want to think about another passage as well, just quickly, which comes from Holy Week when Jesus is anointed at Bethany. Particularly in John's Gospel, there was a small phrase that stood out to me, which I don't think I'd heard before, which is in John 12, verse 3, which is when Mary pours the oil and the perfume onto Jesus' feet. And the phrase is, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume, which I think is a really powerful picture that as Mary does this small act of worship, that actually the whole house is filled with the perfume. And as you worship God, His presence will come and it'll fill not just you, not just your room, but your whole house. And it's something that hopefully your whole family can see and can feel. So yeah, I hope you've got something from what I've said or what my family have said. Hopefully you can go into this week worshipping God more, worshipping God with your whole life. So yeah, hope you have a great week, and may God bless you. So Yasmin, what does it mean to worship God with your whole life?